we have Hian Goh, Michael Blakey, and Tiang with us. Let me just introduce myself a little bit to everyone. My name is Ho Kheng Lian. I'm one of the co-founders of Open Circles that's helping to produce Epic today. I'm also in the venture capital scene, having my own investment firm, capital advisory, and acquisition firm called the Kollective Group. But today, what we're here for is to hear from Michael, Tiang, and Hian on how to become a better entrepreneur when we all start that journey. So we're going to have these huge names in the tech entrepreneur scene to inform, educate, inspire you on what it takes to be the next great tech entrepreneur. So they're all a little bit nervous now because we're putting a lot on their shoulders, you know. So let me just introduce them a little bit in full. First off, we have Hian Goh, co-founder and general partner at Openspace Ventures. Yes, it's the man that's waving very wide. It's a venture capital fund based in Singapore, investing in early stage startups in Southeast Asia. In a past life, he founded Asian Food Channel. I'm very sure many of you may have watched the channel before. It's a 24-hour pay TV channel that was sold to US media giant Scripps Interactive in April 2013 for $66 million. So we know where the money is here. Next,
that
we
was
have
a
Michael.
big amount in those days.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Next, we have Michael Blakey, co-founder and general partner of Cocoon Capital, a VC fund focused on pre-seed, seed stage startups. So Michael is arguably the UK's top angel investor. He was an angel investing even before angel investing was a thing from my conversation with him. He was named UK's top angel investor of the year in 2015 by the UK Business Angels Association. And he also built a couple of successful businesses before that, first being Avon Moore Developments Limited in London and Carp Capital in Singapore. And finally, we have Tiang Foo, founder and general partner of Seedplus, also based in Singapore and investing into seed stage venture firms, as the name might suggest. Tiang is an expert in operations and growth, having started and launched Evernote's operations in Singapore, spearheading market development and business growth in Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. So he really is the go-to man when we're talking about scaling across the entire region. So
I also almost made it to Forbes 30 under 30, almost.
So. I think I'm gonna make it to Forbes 40 under 40 soon.
Good for you.
So for our Epic viewers to get to know each of you better, I thought what better way than to start with asking each of you what your personal worst moments have been in your respective journeys, and what do you want young aspiring entrepreneurs to learn from it? So maybe we can start from Hian, and then we'll go to Michael, and then we'll go to Tiang. I know Hian has very good stories. He has told me a number of them, and I hope he's going to tell the one that I like the most.
Which one is that?
So Hian almost went bankrupt many times, everyone, but here he is today, sitting in that chair, looking all successful.
Okay, well, thank you, Kheng Lian. Yes, I look very successful, indeed. No, I think, first and foremost, for anyone who's on the chat right now, just know that a lot of us work with entrepreneurs every day, and it's actually a very intense journey, but it's also very rewarding, I think, at the end of the day. And the reason why it's rewarding is that it's stressful, but it's very self-empowering. So I decided to become an entrepreneur, and my perspective is that I am possibly the worst example of a person who should become an entrepreneur. I have a law degree from a very prestigious university. I have an MBA from another very prestigious university. I'm Singaporean, I studied very hard. And so my opportunity cost to be an entrepreneur was very high, but there was something in my heart that said, look, listen, you're never going to be fully happy if you just went and did it yourself. And so I actually had two startups that didn't succeed prior to Asian Food Channel. And I think that's the first thing that is very, very typical of any entrepreneur that I speak of, I talk to. They always have many different failures, many different early things that they tried that didn't work out. And so Asian Food Channel turned out to be, in essence, the right thing at the right time. And it started to do very well. It started to get distribution, and we were in a really good shape. But what happened was that we got into a funding crisis. We've many different funding crises. And this was still when I was very, very early in the journey. And it got to a point, details are just to keep it very brief, where I literally couldn't pay the payroll. And the venture capitalists were holding out because we hadn't hit some benchmarks and stuff like that. And it's really now who's going to give you just like literally $150,000 just to pay the payroll so that you can continue negotiating. And I threw in the towel. I said, there's no way. But thankfully, my business partner at the time, she was definitely much more experienced, much more savvy, and much more gung-ho. She literally got onto the phone with an angel investor who was based in San Francisco and pretty much cajoled that person to give the money. And it was that moment when we were talking about it on the call. I remember we were in a car at the bottom of Wheelock Place, on the phone call. And the angel investor said, so what happens if we lose all the money, guys? What are you going to do? And my business partner said, well, Daniel, if we lose all your money, I'm going to take my bag and I'm going to come over to your apartment anyway. And I'm going to just cook and clean for you because I'll have no money myself and I have nowhere to stay. And that's how deep we're in on this whole thing. And I just looked and I was like, you said what? And then Daniel was silent for like 15 seconds. And he just started laughing. He laughed so hard. He said, okay, guys, all right, I'll get you the money. And it just proved, and I think that's the perspective, that there are people who, for Daniel, $150,000 was not a big thing. He was very wealthy, but he just didn't want to give it to the wrong person for the wrong mission. So I think that's the first thing that I learned. And the second thing is that I learned is that it's really about emotions. I mean, if my business partner did not actually get to just get him emotionally engaged.
Right.
And I think most decisions are based a lot of times on emotions, and we rationalize it back. So is that the story that you were thinking of, Kheng Lian?
Yeah. Were your pants on fire when everything was going down? How did you feel, and how do people also manage that if they ever
What do you mean by pants on fire?
Because you were running out of payroll. What was going to happen next? Were you also ready to pack your bags and move into that man's house and clean his floor for him?
No, I'd have to move into my mom's house. So. But pants, of course, you're very stressful. And I think that's where, having good investors and good venture capitalists who kind of have seen it and been there. Michael's a great example. I want to pass the mic over to Michael. The number of scar tissues, number of scars that Michael has. I think if you have investors who've been there and they're not freaking out when the proverbial shit hits the fan, like in February. When COVID hit, we sat down and I sat the team down and I said, everybody go talk to your entrepreneurs now, go find out what's going on. Mm-hmm. And don't wait for them to call you. You go call them, say how things going, what's going on. And we've had to put a couple of rescue financing. Panned out, some didn't. But yeah, I think that's the benefit of having investors who've been there.
Yeah, for our young aspiring entrepreneurs out there, I don't know about you, but what I'm taking from it is emotional connection with your investors. That's very important, as well as with your partner, and keeping your cool, not freak out, right? Next, from there, maybe we can get Michael to share a little bit about your personal worst moment.
I guess if I look at it from the entrepreneur side, I've got many as from an investor side, but as we're talking, I think mostly people here are looking at the entrepreneurial journey. Mm-hmm. I think it was, I became an entrepreneur without even knowing what, entrepreneurism, what it isn't, what it, back in my days, I'm my mid 40s, back in the days, saying we're going to become an entrepreneur as a career wasn't something that was ever really discussed. Mm-hmm. I just kind of fell into entrepreneurism. I needed to make money. Nobody would hire me. So I was like, I'll just have to start my own business.
What year was this, Michael? What year was it?
This was in the late 90s.
Wow.
So I think the hardest time for me to actually admit is that the first couple of businesses I set up, I would say more lifestyle businesses. They paid for my life, but I did it as a sole founder. And I think the realization hit me in the late 90s that I was horrendous entrepreneur, in the sense of I couldn't lead. I was not a founder. I was not the CEO. I was not I could come up with the ideas. I could deal with the big picture. But I got to a stage where I had to look at myself in a mirror and say, if I carry on doing this, I'm going to kill myself. And, my lifestyle was, I was doing a day job and doing my business on the side. I was probably sleeping about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours a day. My diet was about 8 to 10 cans of Red Bull, 40 cigarettes, and a whole bunch of pot noodles, which is why my body is my temple, as Hian will know. I'm not one of the, and even at one point in time, I didn't actually have anywhere to live. I was just living in the office. I just thought it would be easier to do that than anything else, because I have some of the traits that are very bad for specifically an entrepreneur to have, which is I couldn't prioritize, I couldn't delegate. So when my companies grew, I just decided to work more hours. And I couldn't, and so success was actually ending up trying to kill me. And there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many days you can survive on that diet of and that lifestyle. So my brother came in and he just said, Michael, this is, somebody stepped in and said, you just got to look at it, and you can't do this by yourself. You've actually got to do it with somebody. But for somebody who struggles to trust others sometimes, that was a very hard thing for me to do. So the only way that I would do it is I persuaded my brother to become my co-founder and to work together. So I think, and it's something that I firmly believe is probably the most important thing for a founder to do. I know we'll come to this later, is actually find a co-founder and also recognize where your weaknesses are, and find people who are the opposite. So, anybody who knows my business partner over here, Will Clipkin, or my brother, Simon, who is my partner back in the UK, will understand that we're like chalk and cheese. And it's mostly because I need people to actually cover my weakness, cover my, to make me as a better whole. And I think, and to have somebody that you can trust implicitly. Both of my partners I've been very lucky with is, even though we might fight, might argue, people call Will Clipkin and myself like we're an old married couple, because we're always kind of arguing with each other. But in terms of the absolute trust and faith that I have in Will, is, I would give him the keys of my house, as they would say. So I think that's a really important thing to have, because you'll go through very difficult times and you always need to believe, like Hian was mentioning with his co-founder, that you have to have implicit trust. They don't have to be the best people. They just have to be people that you believe they will have your back no matter what.
Yeah, I hear you, Michael. I mean, what you're trying to say is that when you're building your company, health and wasn't on your mind, and you were just working so hard on it. And what you really needed was that partner who would cover your weaknesses so that you would have a more balanced life after that, right? And I think a lot of our aspiring entrepreneurs out there should keep that in mind as well. It's not really about killing yourself. Kill yourself smartly by finding a good partner to cover for you. How about Tiang? What was your worst?
For me, it's really about people, right? The best bits about the journey of entrepreneurship and startup is people. The worst bit is also people, right? I think for me, there are two really specific moments. So before Evernote, I was a early founding team of a mobile payment company based here in Singapore. We didn't call it fintech back then because that word hasn't been invented yet, right? It was like 10 years ago, and convincing someone to join a really scrappy startup is already a very difficult thing to do. And almost always every employee who joined us, every staff, every even intern who showed up, I'm always grateful, right? Because you're investing your career with us, you're entrusting your your future with us, right? Financial or otherwise. So almost always when it didn't work out and that startup didn't work out, right? Else it would be a different story now. Was telling people that sorry, the rocket ship didn't quite take off, right? So what do we do here? And to me, the best bit is always about working with a group of really fantastic, motivated, smart, driven people. The worst bit is also the same, right? Because when the reverse happens, when the rocket doesn't take off, you're letting people go. And I personally feel like I've failed people, right? But thankfully, because of that journey, when it happened at the fast forward a few years later when I was at Evernote, building up the team here, and there was a strategic change in leadership, and we had a scale down significantly in Asia. Had to start letting people go as well. Some employees joined us barely 2-3 months, right, before that happened. I made it a personal mission to help everyone get a job, right?
Wow.
And everyone got a job, right? I was making calls, I was writing recommendation letters, and I'm really glad that everyone ended up in great places, And to me, that's the very important lesson I learned here is, if you were to be successful, bring everyone with you. If you were to fail, make sure everyone is successful anyway, right? Because the ecosystem is so small, and I think we're investing in ourselves and in people around us for the long term anyway. And I'm very grateful I did all those back then, 5-10 years ago, because a lot of what a lot of my seemingly success story today, the seeds were planted way back then, right? The angel investments that I made, for example, were engineers that were spun out from the first fintech company that I was part of the founding team of. A few key hires I made, right, that I've placed in my current portfolio company were people from Evernote that I worked with from before. And some of the companies I ended up invested in were ex-colleagues from the Evernote network, right? So it all turned out well, but it didn't seem that obvious that time, but it paid off in the long term. So.
People remember that, Tiang. People remember that.
Yeah.
Well done.
So I wanted to start also from the beginning when an entrepreneur is thinking about what to do. So we did a survey. So the APEC CEO survey states that Singapore is an ideal place for aspiring entrepreneurs to launch their startups. But our survey of 207 respondents state that 81.6% have considered being entrepreneurs, while only 13.6% are actual entrepreneurs. I'm here basically speaking to that 13.6%. So what would you tell our aspiring entrepreneurs that they should be considered, that they should be thinking through to be able to take that leap? Because you guys actually made that leap. So why don't we start the other way around? Like we'll start with Tiang this time.
I think for me, really, it's about some of the best founders I work with. I mean, to me, the greatest characteristic is they have such a degree of conviction that you just can't help but go along with the ride, right? It doesn't matter, whether the idea is non-obvious, doesn't matter, you don't know anything about that sector. And most of the time, as an investor, you can't know everything under the sun anyway. But, to me, if I reflect on the numerous founders that I worked with before, almost always it's about that degree of conviction, that makes me feel like I don't care even if I'm just investing like 10 grand, right? I will work for you. It's that degree of conviction that I feel it's very inspiring to me. And as a second order effect, that's inspiring for, the partners that they work with, their customers, the employees that they recruit. It's such an important quality that I feel is very hard to find, but once you find it, you know it. So.
When you say conviction, do you mean conviction in your own abilities, conviction that this product is going to be the better than sliced bread? Or what do you mean by conviction?
I think it goes deeper than that. I think it's about the belief that, something needs to change because something is so broken, right?
Wow.
I might have a solution, right? This is the idea that I've hypothesized that potentially could be a solution to the problem I'm describing. But we all know that when business plans hit the road, it almost always doesn't work out that way, right? I usually take the first, even second, third ideas as, it's just a hypothesis, but that conviction carries through, right? I think it is the deeper sense of like, okay, the problem's so big, it's so broken, I just need to do something about
it. Right. Wonderful. How about you, Michael?
I think, in terms of what holds people back, I think it's very much the fear of failure. It's a lot of people are not trying to, are very worried, especially the younger generation are like, okay, have we, our parents, our families have spent a fortune, we spent all this time on our education, and now we're going to go, and the expectation is that, we're going to be a doctor, a consultant, a banker, a lawyer or something. And all of a sudden I'm going to say, well, I'm going to take this job. I'm going to set up this company. I've got no experience. And I'm going to hope that it works out, but majority of the time it won't work out, and it's the disappointing. We're not going to earn anything for the next 2 or 3 years, and the reality is that I think, especially in Singapore and Southeast Asia, we still don't have a huge number of success stories where they can say we can be the next Mark Zuckerberg, or we can talk about next Hian Goh, in the sense of we don't have the household names, we haven't seen the successes on the local. So in terms of talking to your families, as I said, I never had that problem because I never really thought I would ever, my family, because of my schooling, never really expected me to do that well. And, so they thought, well, pretty much the only person who will hire Michael is himself. Right. So, and I think that, but to be a successful entrepreneur, I think you have to have this huge amount in confidence in yourself, but not move into the arrogance. So the thing is that, and I'm sure Tiang here and I don't know how many times we've probably been told that we'll fail, our idea sucks, what the hell are we thinking, get a real job, all of those things which are thrown at you, not just by random people, but by your own family. And you have to have that confidence and self-belief in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, coming from an investor's point of view, if we see any little kind of chink in your armor of do you actually maybe not believe in yourself? And that could be when you say things like, I try, I hope. So those little things were like, well, we've got to believe that you believe. If we can't believe that you even believe in what you're doing, how can we kind of back you? So you've got to, even if you do have self-doubts, you can't let anybody see it. But there's also the problem that you can actually go too far the other way, is if you fall into arrogance. So confidence is, I can tell Hian something, and even if he disagrees with it, he'll listen to it. And then if he thinks, oh, there's 1 or 2 things I've said which is useful, he can change what he believes. He can change his beliefs. Arrogance is like, doesn't matter what anybody tells you, you know best, and you'll never actually listen to anybody else. And the thing I've learned through my years is that nobody knows everything, but you've got to have that belief in what you're doing. So always be open to change. I've got no qualms about changing my opinions on things or being proven wrong, because I've always kind of said, well, that's part of the journey, and that's what I really meant, and kind of wing it that way. But so for me, I think what stops people becoming entrepreneurs in Singapore a lot is that fear, the worry of what people will think if it doesn't work. And then I think what stops the individual sometimes is that lack of confidence in themselves, not having that belief that they can actually start that journey, because it is a big step, especially if you're coming from a job. I mean, I never had a job, so it's kind of easy. I think Jiang and Hian were coming from, well-paid jobs. That's a big leap. You get used to a certain lifestyle, and all of a sudden you're like, oh hell, I'm not going to have this, nice paycheck every month and whatever, and I'm not going to be able to go on.
Your perspective is so interesting, because my perspective was, I have enough of this. So there must be something more to this than life, than just having a job, and boy did I realize the other way.
Yeah, but you got to remember, I never had a job. So
yeah, that's right, Michael. Just for the audience, you got to know I hang out with Michael a lot, and I hang out as much. And Tiang and I, we spend some time together, but he's never told me that. Well, from that perspective, so I'm learning. I'll answer the question. Kheng Lian, yeah. So I'm trying to be useful to the audience. I think the audience will probably have some burning questions as to, first of all, there's 3 of us here. We run quite a fair amount of capital, and we have to literally pass this capital to people, these hallowed people called entrepreneurs. And just looking at the question that just came in, right? Like, do you think of the business model or the existing free cash flow? There is no cash flow, guys. Maybe it's existing negative cash flow, right?
It's mostly LNP. So.
There's nothing. So what is it, especially in the seed? For me, it's slightly different because it's Series A, but the same principles still apply. So I'm going to try to explain how I sort of pattern recognize. I must have met over the course of 7 years, maybe like, I'd call it 5,000-6,000 entrepreneurs. And who are the people who stand out, right? So Michael's tried to explain it as, people are very confident. For me, it's slightly different. I look for 2 things. One is I look for a self-learning organism. And the second thing I look for is emotional authenticity. So what does that mean? So a self-learning organism it's like a problem-solving organism. You go like, well, how did you come up with this problem? Well, I thought of this. I realized this is the problem. And then I went and I looked at it, talked to this person, and realized it wasn't really the case. And then I went there, and then, that was a dead end. But I'm like, yeah, that's called a self-learning organism. And the myth that somehow Brian Chesky came up with the Airbnb idea, no, it's very much more evolutionary than revolutionary. You hear all these stories. I can tell you my Asian food channel story is boring, but it's exactly the case. And then the second thing that I like to ask is, why are you trying to solve that problem? Tell me your origin story. Why did you become Batman? Why did you become Superman, right? And what's your origin story? It's very important to me because a lot of times, some people who purport to be entrepreneurs, they're actually just kind of like hustlers. The line is very thin. And people I think who are you can truly call entrepreneurs are people who are driven by this sense of purpose. Gosh damn it, I really need to fix this problem. And they apply, a self-learning organism principle to solve it. That gets me very excited. And I feel that that gives a bit of self-awareness such that your investors can help shape the company that you are. You get some feedback. One of the things I think was missing in the ecosystem, which inspired me to be a venture capitalist, is the fact that sometimes you may have the best idea or you might have the best approach, but maybe the total addressable market is not correct, or maybe you didn't realize that someone's going to sideswipe you from this industry, and you can spend many, many years doing it, and it turns out that you're wasting your time. And the good thing about venture capitalists, hopefully, people who are in this ecosystem, is we have much more 30,000 feet view of the world. And so we can tell you, or we know, roughly what's hot, what's not hot, why things are hot, why things are not hot, who's actually going to acquire a company like this. We've got an asymmetry of information. That's the lifeblood of venture capitalists. And if you can marry that as well as very effective, inspired, self-aware entrepreneurs, I think that's where you get the $1 billion opportunity to best arrive.
We should probably though actually define, what VCs are looking for. I turned down, I'm sure you turned down lots of good companies because an entrepreneur could be somebody who sets up a restaurant, and no VC on the whole is ever going to invest in a restaurant. So as a VC, right, we are looking to invest in home run. We don't want an infield hit. It might be that could be. So we're not just looking for good businesses, we're looking for great businesses. And I think quite often we see companies that come to us, we look at it and we're like, yeah, fine. But even if it's successful, it's not going to give us the return. So for a lot of entrepreneurs, they waste time talking to the wrong investors or the wrong money, because on the whole, we are greedy guys. We want that. We're willing to take the higher risk, but we want the higher returns at the back end of it. And I think that's really an important side of it. And I always say when I'm talking to founders, I can help teach you most things that you need to become a successful founder or successful CEO, because I've learned from my mistakes. But I said I can't teach common sense. So we quite often, when people come, especially Tiang to I, but even to Hian, they'll come along and say, we want $1 million. They'll pitch to you for like 15, 20 minutes. And at the end of it, they're like, can we have $1 million, please? And I'm like, well, I hardly know you, mate. Pardon language, but I've just met you.
That one usually lasts 5 minutes for me. I mean, 15 is pretty good for you. I definitely have a shorter attention.
But every interaction I've had with you up until that point tells me something about you. So yeah. I feel sorry for this bloke that actually once sent me an email, and he was asking for $1 million, and he was like, "Hey, dude." And I was like, what? And he was English. He wasn't even American. He was English. It was like
there was no emotional authenticity to that.
And I was like, because the thing that we see, and I think one of the issues that we see a lot as we see some amazing. I do a lot of hardware stuff, a lot of deep tech, and I see a lot of amazing tech. But the problem is the founders also have to be able to sell it. So every interaction that I ever have with a founder when they're asking me for money kind of tells me how they're gonna be able to sell their product. And I'm like, if somebody's coming up to me and they think it's appropriate, to start off with the hey dude.
Well, perhaps we can distill the lesson that I think it's much better if you get a warm introduction or you get some emotional connectivity, because this is not about buying a stock or buying, Zoom on a stock exchange. This is a human relationship, and you're going to have to journey with people for almost a decade and that's the success story. If you only journey with someone for 2 years, that's because the guy went bankrupt. That's the unsuccess story. So maybe that's the point that a lot of maybe the audience should know, that we take these relationships very seriously. It's pretty much a marriage with the entrepreneur, because once you put in the first check-in, the expectation is you got to keep this company afloat. You can't walk away. And so let's not send Michael a dude email and think that you're going to be able to marry him.
No, and then ask Michael for dowry, right? The $1 million for me. Sounds like dowry. How about Tiang? What do you think? What do you look out for, Tiang?
Well, all the above, right? Everything's valid. I do have a question for Michael, actually. When you said we're looking for home runs, right? But at the same time, what's a home run in your parlance, right? You know what I mean? Is $1 billion cool enough? What's cool? 10 billion these days? What's a home run in your definition?
I really hate when people I'm going to invest in the next unicorn or whatever. Because I've invested in a company that I sold for 100 million, and I probably made more than a lot of people made in a company that was sold for $1 billion, because it only ever took one round of investment. So we invested $500,000 at the seed round, which was just a few million, and then we sold it for just over 100 million. Wow. So, and didn't have to raise any further funding. That was it. So I normally look at companies and I kind of like, well, I want to believe that there's the opportunity for me to make 10 million, and then I've got to believe where can this company go and how much money is it going to need to get there. And then I also look at the founders and say, do I believe that these are the right guys to get it, the right team to get it there, or do they recognize that they'll need to build a team around them? Because this is where the confidence and arrogance comes in, is that especially at the stage I'm at, a lot of founders are really good at coming up. There are people like me, really good at coming up with the idea, but they absolutely suck. And also, if you're 21, you've never built a business before, so. But do they recognize the fact that they're going to have to bring people in alongside them and sometimes even above them to actually help the company go to become a global business if that's what it needs to happen?
Yeah. But that's to the point of the characteristic of the founder, or as Tiang is asking, how do you actually determine what a home run is? Maybe if I can try.
A home run is, I would say, I want to believe that I can at least make 10 times return on the investment, which is, I think, the standard answer. But I don't know what the end number is.
Right. Yeah. So for the audience, maybe the best way of thinking about it, and I think it's very useful for the audience to see how venture capitalists and our insecurities work, and how our brains work, is that we want to do what we call a fund returner. So my fund 3 is $200 million. I want to make that one investment into that one company that gets me back $200 million. So which therefore means that, if it's a 10 bagger, I have to, over the course of the investment, put 20 million in. And I might do that over 6 rounds and 4 rounds. But the first round I might give you 5 million, or maybe even worse, I might give you 3 million. Because guess what? It's a bit like playing poker. Poker's a great analogy. You've got a good hand, you put some money in, the cards come in, and now and then you can really start to put money in. So I think there's a lot of that kind of thinking that venture capitalists think, and it's very useful for the audience perhaps to read a couple of books about how venture capitalists think. And then that when you get a rejection from a venture capitalist, I guarantee you 95% of the time it's because it's just not the right investment for that venture capitalist. And it's not necessarily a full judgment on your idea. Having said that, there are some ideas which guaranteed all venture capitalists will say no. But a lot of times, if you come to, I see this a lot of times, people come to us and go like, we don't do these kind of investments. Do your research, do your homework, get great angel investors who are already in the network. And they know which VCs, what people like. I know what Tiang likes. I know what Michael likes. And so that's how you got to join the ecosystem. Part of this journey of joining and listening to Epic and having Kheng Lian and everybody come. So try and get people like ourselves to give a perspective. It's a relationship. It's not like buying a stock on Zoom on the stock exchange.
I love what all you're saying, because I think it is for entrepreneurs to also understand the relationship that they are getting into when they ask for funding. Because a lot of times there's no emotional connection or authenticity, and they just think of it as, hey, I'm just trying to get money in to fund this idea. But I love how all of you have just shared that there's so many different layers to it, that it really is that marriage. It's going to be long term. It's also people that you want in your house, that you want guiding, leading, and building together with. Sorry, Tiang, you were going to say something.
No, I think just adding to that, right? I think some of the best founders I work with know how to leverage their investors, and they go in with a very clear view on, okay, here's capital and value add, here's capital and value add B, here's capital and value add C, right? And to me, the point about self-learning it's spot on, about emotional authenticity, spot on. I'll just add one more to that, which is situational awareness. Right.
Situational awareness?
Yeah, situational awareness, right? That you're not just building a company in vacuum. You're not fundraising in a vacuum, right? And in the true sense of the word, once you have investors and a cap table on your board, these are your business partners, right? And having that situational awareness of what your partner needs, how can you work with for your partner? How do you create value for your partner? It's I think almost always the precursor to building a highly scalable venture, right? Because it does take a lot to build a big company, So.
I think.
Can I just say something? Just a challenge. I know this is weird coming from a VC and an angel investor, but also you can build successful companies without raising funding. There is definitely sometimes an addiction that goes on with founders, that they have it like, I need to raising funding is a kind of it's ticking the box of success. and it's like, you raised only 2 million. No, I raised 5 million, you know. And it's like, and they forget that sometimes, you know, you can build that. There are a number of like, you know, massive global businesses that have never taken on external funding, because what they figured out was either they had a job on the side, which is what I try to do unsuccessfully, have a job on the side that will pay for my startup, or they figured out they able to build a product right at the beginning, and they were able to generate revenue from day one.
MailChimp
maybe
is
the best
inspiration, right?
The best way. Sorry, which one was such an inspiration?
MailChimp, right? $1 billion company,
MailChimp,
external funding. It's amazing.
So maybe the best way of thinking about it is, what decisions do you make as an entrepreneur that increase the probability of your success? Raising $2 million and raising $5 million does, maybe in my opinion, is not what you should be focused on. It's who's giving you that $2 million, who's giving you the $5 million. So $2 million from smart money like Michael and Tiang, versus $5 million from, you know, your angel network, which includes, you know, doctors, lawyers, accountants, and they will freak out because they don't like losing money, because they're doctors, lawyers, and accountants. Whereas Michael gave you 2 million, and he comes with that wealth of a network. So I think the distilling point is, what decisions are you gonna make? Do you want to be a single founder and keep all the stock, or do you want to have co-founders who complement you and you share the shareholding of the company? Which one is going to increase the probability of your success? That should be your single-minded focus, not getting rich per se, because you know, a lot of times people do have 1 or 2 success stories, and then they go on to the big one. Travis Kilkennick is classic. People don't realize it. I think he started Uber in his late 30s, maybe, or even like, but he had a couple of companies. He had 1 small exit, and he parlayed that into basically seed financing Uber. I think that's really what you really need to think about as an entrepreneur. What decisions you make to increase the probability of your success.
I think what you guys were also saying, in fact, and this is a point of what Michael said, it might not even be 2 million or 5 million. The question is, should I be taking outside capital? Do I need that funding? Because I've met young founders as well who, let's go raise money. Let's go raise money. I was like, wait, do you really need to raise money? Why do you need to raise money? So I think these are also other questions that founders should be considering. I think you guys did a great job, very comprehensive coverage of that question that the main stage posed. So let's also consider another question. And this is something that I had. So I used to be a lawyer like Hian, and I switched into the abyss, not knowing what to do next, the transition, and then figuring out this entrepreneurial journey of my own. But while I was a lawyer, I was always wanting to break out of it, but I always said I don't have the right idea, or I don't know what to do. And I hear this a lot from my peers, or even when we were in school, we'll always look up to these entrepreneurs and go, hey, I want to build something. So what would you guys say? What if I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't have that innovative idea? Because I think many out there listening today might have that. Who wants to take a crack at this first?
Nominate Hian. Knowingly.
Okay. No, okay. First of all, I would say is that are you even looking hard enough for that innovative idea? Right? People have innovative ideas. If you look around, if you've got a mindset where you're always very frustrated with problems, or like the founder of Spanx, right? She's like, I can't find a good garter. How many women probably walk to a departmental store and say, I can't find a good garter? And so then the question is, when you do actually have what you think is the solution to the problem, do you have the audacity to give everything up and do it? Mm-hmm. So I almost feel like, and it's the same thing. I'll give you my example. Yeah. I was in INSEAD. I had paid a lot of money for my MBA. I met an old friend. He said, there are no like really good Asian cable TV networks. And it turns out that it's true. And then we found out that actually, oh my goodness, food channels are so popular, but there's no food channel in Asia. It was just dumbfounding. And then I had to make the decision not to go back into a professional job and to do this. So I think that you will find if you've got that mindset, it will turn up. So I don't want to say people are making excuses, but I just think the mindset is very critical. Tiang, do you agree? Tiang.
101% agree. What I was gonna say is that you don't have to be a founder right now, right? What's the hurry? I think a lot of youth and younger people that, oh yeah, I'm reading TechCrunch every day. I'm reading Tech in Asia every day. Everyone's on 30 except me. but what's the hurry, right? I think a lot of people are doing it for sometimes the wrong reasons. Not knowing the time, effort, sacrifices, involvement, investment that needs to be made, right? Hopefully you're sleeping better than Michael, right? But still, you're probably not sleeping for 7 hours a day, right? So I think a lot of times then I think it's really a little bit of that illusion of going into entrepreneurship just because, right? If you can be a little patient, maybe be very focused on getting better on personal development, learning getting some experiences, maybe just start working in a startup, right, to see what it's like first, right, before even jumping out. I think that will probably save you a lot more time and money and heartaches and heart pain, right? I mean, just like you can say, right, Travis Kalanick when we started Uber at 30-ish, right? And I think there's a survey that went around for a bit in the US that say that most successful entrepreneurs actually started their companies in their early 40s, right? So, what's the hurry, I
was like, yay, I have a chance now. Yay, I'm liberated.
Absolutely.
But I think the other way of looking at it, it's not necessarily, a lot of people are like, oh, what's the great idea? And I think it's been mentioned before, very rarely do we ever come across anything which is totally revolutionary. It's more of an evolution of ideas that have come past, and it's more about, is the time right? I'm kind of like mentoring a very close friend of mine who's kind of like, no, I want to do the next step in my career. I'm thinking of starting a business. And he's like, I've got all these amazing ideas or things like, I think I could do, and build a business around. And I come back to the point that I kind of made at the beginning. I think sometimes it's better to find that business partner. The hardest thing to actually do is not actually come up with an idea. A good founder is always coming up with ideas. They're always seeing opportunities where people just see problems. But finding that person that has the same passion for the same idea is extremely difficult. So if you can find that co-founder that solves covers your weaknesses, and then finding an idea that you both can believe in, I think is actually a much easier journey than actually coming up with the idea, and then you've got to go and find somebody who actually believes as much in the idea as you. And you're kind of making the life the hardest. So for me, it's getting out there. And if you're a non-techie founder, so everybody knows that technology and I do not mix well. I hate it. It hates me even more. So I know that if I was ever to do a tech business, and one of the things Will is very good at is he knows technology inside out, is I had to go and find somebody who knows technology and could, not that we're building a tech business, but if he were building a tech business, then we'll be the perfect, because he could build the tech. And my
complementarity.
Exactly. And I see a lot of founders who are have no idea about tech, very similar to me. And they're like, yeah, we'll just build tech. And they make it sound really easy, not realizing that sometimes the complexity of it and what they might think is very simple. And they start banning those words around. We're going to use, machine learning, AI, big data, all that, they try and put it all in that one sentence when they're describing what they're doing. And any tech person will look at them and think, what have you just smoked?
I'll give you one that my pet peeve. Can I give you my pet peeve, please? I don't do it that often anymore, but sometimes you meet somebody who they just got so much hubris, right? And then they'll say things like, we're going to make this into $1 billion business in 3 years' time. Hian, I'm telling you now, if you don't invest $1 billion, so I'd be like, okay, that's cool. Do me a favor, in 3 years' time, which is 2022, what does your company look like? How many people, which operations, what's the size, what's the revenue? And they've never, it's just like one of those, and they go, I'm like, no, you said you're going to be $1 billion company, right? So this is when I was a real jackass, right? Like when it gets to that point where I get triggered, right? So the other side of my character, not the smiling here, and more like, yeah, okay, what does it actually look like? And the guy's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you said you were going to be it. And so I think you have to be very careful about the emotional authenticity of the whole situation. And, of course, pitching is a skill, but you can really take it too far. And I was going to say, a lot of times with all these entrepreneurs and stuff like that, it's just taking time to actually build a relationship before you jump in becomes absolutely critical. I'll give you another story. How did I become a venture capitalist? Well, I was an entrepreneur. I was literally, my office was actually across Block 71, right, at Fusionopolis, and I could actually see that. And someone told me to go down there and have a look at this whole thing called entrepreneurship. And I remember I was so cynical. I was like, there's no way. Like, I've been suffering for 10 years. This revolution has been trying to be taken off. I've been here since 1999 no way. And then when I went there, I saw for the first time a couple of things. One, very mobile centric. Two, the DNA of the people were not Singaporean generally. They were like from all around the world. Three, monetization was there. And, four, mobile phone networks being run out. Were being built out. The scar tissue, imagine the scar tissue I had after going through the global financial crisis, spending almost 10 years and still not selling. I hadn't sold my company yet. When I actually, my first check I wrote was to Arif at Chope in 2010 as an angel investor. Imagine the scar tissue I had saying, there's no way. But it took that kind of self-reflection to say, you know what? If you look at the data and you avoid the past scar tissue, this is it. And I gave up everything and I became a venture capitalist. And then I looked at 62 companies before I invested into Chope. I spent 6 months. I was hanging out with people like Michael Smith and all these people. I turned up at conferences. I was like, oh, these guys are so cool. Like, I'm the media guy. I don't know anybody there. It took me 6 months to ingratiate myself. And how I did that was I sat at JFDI. And I became a doctor I was like, anybody got a term sheet? You guys need some advice, everything like that. And then I met a guy named Cameron, and he was doing Trade Gecko.
Right.
And we just sold Trade Gecko, I think. So the whole journey was 7 years. So it takes time. And I think, Brian Chesky, he's taken 11 years to become Airbnb as a public company.
I think what you guys have said things like identify a problem, take an initiative, but don't obsess. Like what Tiang was saying, let it take time, and also what Hian you just said. The idea is not just a starting point. Finding a co-founder to cover your weaknesses is. That's what Michael mentioned. And making the choice is the mark of an entrepreneur. Look for the loopholes, which is what Hian you did when you were looking for that problem to solve, when you figured out, hey, let's work on Asian food channel together. I think we only have time for one last question, and maybe we should cover the one on, and because you guys were talking about entrepreneurship then and entrepreneurship now, what is the entrepreneur going to look like in 10 years time versus what it looked like during your time? Maybe Michael, you want to take that because you were an entrepreneur in the 90s, right?
I think for me, the majority of entrepreneurs back when I started out were, and especially if you look at on the tech, and I wasn't necessarily tech, was probably people in their 40s who had a career somewhere else and they were coming into it. Because back in those days, to even do to start up, you actually couldn't do it yourself. You had to raise at least £5 million. There was no such thing as AWS. Or anything like that. So just the basics, just to get yourself started, minimum 5 million. So anybody who who didn't have a network of people that would back you, because that's obviously a larger sum, you move to today, and probably I don't think it's going to change a huge amount. I think you're going to find global businesses and founders building global businesses anywhere in the world now, where beforehand it was pretty much, it started off exclusivity in California, and then it kind of like moved to New York, and then you talk about 3 or 4 hubs now. I wouldn't be surprised if, suddenly out of Ho Chi Minh or Yangon or anywhere else, you'll find these global businesses being built because talent is everywhere now, and money will flow anywhere. And I think especially now with COVID, so we look at like post-COVID, I don't think there is an age or an experience level. I think, you know, founders now, I've backed in my time a couple of 18-year-olds whilst they were at university. My last investment was in a 21-year-old. He actually had finished university, thank God. So, you know,
everyone, viewers in today from NUS, SIM, etc. You know who to
call.
Yeah.
This guy. Yeah.
This guy.
So actually, just as my last investment was an NUS one from a bunch of students. So it literally for me now, I think it's coming to the domain where beforehand you had to have an education, you had to have moneyed friends, and you had to be in the right city. I think a lot of that is now going out. I think experience is always going to be important, but I think ideas and the passion, and you can learn so much yourself online. You know, Hian mentioned about the ability to self-improve and always be pushing yourself. I'm amazed when people come and they've obviously done a huge amount of research online. They don't always understand what they're doing, but at least that you can see that they're trying to improve themselves. So I think for me, it's my view is that my life is going to become a little bit more difficult, where beforehand, you know, everybody's in Singapore or everybody was in London, and it was a very tight-knit community. It was easy to find everybody. I think now it's going to be much more disparate, and and you're just going to have to kind of, I'm going to have to get off my backside a little bit more and travel around and really kind of hunt for those nuggets and those founders.
Yeah, I think disruption will come from anywhere. That's the future of entrepreneurship, because you don't need permission to set up a website. You don't need the permission to do anything. All these services are available. Everything. The biggest education website actually is YouTube. I think if you haven't realized that, YouTube, you can pretty much learn anything at any levels. When I do due diligence on subjects, I just log on and there'll be an MIT lecture or Stanford lecture, and yeah, you can really drop into a very deep hole for many, many days, as my wife tells me, and not come out for air.
I hope everyone listening out there is getting this. Disruption can come from anywhere. And with that, I think I really want to thank all our panelists today. I'm surprised I didn't have to use the mute button on any of you this time, but thank you.
Vulgarities were hurled today. I'm disappointed.
Yeah, no profanities. This is great. Well done, guys. So thank you very much, Hian, Tiang, and Michael, for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. I'm sure the audience listening in have heard so much about how to thrive as an entrepreneur locally, what to do, what to look out for. And yeah, I think Michael, Hian, and Tiang look out for many emails from the viewers to ask for investments in a very emotionally authentic way. So thank you.
Hey bro, give me a million bucks.
If he's a bro, if he really is a bro, then that works.
Yeah, he's bro, not
but it's
dude.
a dude. It's dude. Come on.
So thank you very much, guys. Next up, we have the battle of fintech and banks with Li Ming from Razor and Ai Hong from Faith right here in 15 minutes. Meanwhile, we'd love to have you over at the Hustlers meetup or random speed dating in the lounge with us. Thank you again, my fellow venture capitalists.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Super. Bye, guys. Thank